And joining me now, the news at 7 is a constitutional lawyer and public affairs analyst, Godspower Egbule. Mr. Egbule, thank you for joining us on the news this hour. A Rivers High Court has now issued an interim injunction restraining the Speaker, the House, and even the Chief Judge from taking further impeachment-related steps. But as you've seen, the Assembly is insisting it will proceed. From a constitutional standpoint, can the House legally continue this impeachment process in the face of this court order, or would that amount to contempt of court?
Quickly, let me state that by the provisions of Section 188, Sub 10 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, no court has the jurisdiction to entertain any matter with respect to the proceedings relating to impeachment of a governor or deputy governor. And there are also judicial authorities to this effect. I know that the Court of Appeal in Aberibi versus the Abia State House of Assembly has also re-echoed that when it comes to impeachment of a governor or deputy governor, no court has jurisdiction to thwart or entertain any questions with respect to whether such impeachment procedure follows the due process of law. But you see, the only time the court will interfere is when the House of Assembly has issued that impeachment notice, the CJ constitutes a panel, then the governor or the deputy governor has a right to appear before the panel set up by the chief judge. Then after that, if that particular procedure did not comply with the provisions of the law, then the occupant of the office affected now has a right to approach the court. But at this time, the Constitution and even judicial authorities do not permit any judicial officer to interfere or even restrain the House of Assembly, because it is a constitutional duty. And, you know, we have separation of powers. The judiciary has its functions, the legislative arm has its functions, the executive arm has its function. You cannot go to court to say, for instance, you want to stop the governor for acting as a governor. That's the same thing. You can't go to court to stop the legislative arm from acting, you know, in the exercise of their functions.
I hear you, Mr. Egbule, but how do you...
the judiciary from exercising judicial powers.
How do you react to those who say this injunction is a legitimate exercise of judicial oversight to protect due process in this regard?
The Constitution has provided, is when the Constitution provides the means by which something can be done, that thing must be strictly complied with. The Constitution has said no judicial officer should entertain the proceedings relating to the impeachment of a governor. And so as the constitutional democracy, and that means that everything must be done in accordance with the provisions of a law. So at this point, it will be too hasty for any judicial officer to want to thwart that process. And you see, there would always be a fair hearing, even in that panel set up by the CG. And that's why you have the Constitution provides that the occupant of that office being impeached will have a right to, you know, make his own representation or be represented by a legal practitioner of his choice. So at this point, it will be too hasty to thwart the process of impeachment. That is not contemplated within the provisions of the Constitution.
As we speak now, this court specifically barred the Chief Judge from receiving or acting on any impeachment request. But the Assembly has still written to him to constitute a 7-man panel. What options does he realistically have now? Are we going to rely on his interpretation of separation of powers, as you have mentioned? What are the legal consequences also if he either complies with the Assembly or obeys the court order?
Well, at this point, the impeachment proceedings has moved from the Rivers State House of Assembly. Is now, the bulk now stops at the CJ. Now, the CJ will need to set up that panel to investigate whether the allegations leveled against the occupant of the office, in this instance, the governor and the deputy governor, whether they are actually valid. Now, it is left for the CJ, but for those of us who are constitutional lawyers, we would like to see how this, you know, pan out within the Rivers State Judiciary, because we know that courts do not have the jurisdiction to interfere at this point. So for some of us, we would like to see how this pans out, you know, in the coming days.
One day, one drama with Rivers development. What we're seeing right now is a situation where the Assembly is pushing ahead. The court in Rivers is halting the process, and political tensions also escalating on the other hand. What are the most likely legal and political outcomes in the coming days, and what does this standoff mean for governance, for stability and the rule of law in Rivers State?
Let me get your question. Are you saying that an impeachment process appears to be like a political tool to stampede the governance of Rivers State?
No. I'm saying a lot is happening at once. The assembly is pushing ahead. The court is halting the process. We're also feeling the political tension. What should we expect in the coming days, and what impact will this have on governance and stability in Rivers State? That's the question.
I didn't get that question correctly.
What should we expect in the coming days, especially as it impacts on governance, the quality of governance, with all of the things we're seeing happening at once in the polity?
Well, the governor was elected to perform executive powers. You know, if you take a look at the provisions of the Constitution, the governor was elected. There are duties placed upon the governor, which he must discharge. But the thing is, the governor cannot work in isolation, you know, from the House of Assembly. The three arms of government, the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, actually need to partner for the progress of Rivers State. The governor cannot act in isolation from the House of Assembly. And so the governor needs to partner with the House of Assembly to make sure that his developmental plans actually come to fruition. But a situation where we see that the governor seems to be acting in isolation from the House of Assembly, these are the things triggering the kind of political crisis that we have. But you see, irrespective of political colorations that anybody wants to give, impeachment proceedings is a provision provided in the Constitution. And so the question should always be, is a laid-down procedure as provided in the Constitution followed? If it is, the other political correlations don't come to play.
If this, what's it called, the intent to impeach the governor, the constitutional provision gives an extended period up to 3 months. Are you saying that in those period of time, should this impeachment process go ahead, governance is going to be on a pause in Rivers State?
Well, you see, that's actually the reason why we ought not to have gotten to the point where we are now. You know, and the excuse that the governor would give that impeachment proceedings seem to thwart governance in Rivers State is not justifiable, because that itself is a legislative business. You know, the same way you have the executive carrying on the executive business, that's the same way you have the legislature carrying on with legislative business. So the excuse that impeachment proceedings will thwart governance in Rivers State, if you ask me, is non-justifiable. I mean, if you do not have any skeleton in your cupboard, you wouldn't be afraid of any impeachment proceedings. The only time a governor will be afraid of any impeachment proceedings is when there are skeletons in the cupboard. So if you don't have any skeletons in the cupboard, the impeachment proceeding will come to an end, and if the panel finds out that the allegations leveled against you are not founded, I mean, that's where the impeachment proceedings stop. So at this point, the excuse that impeachment proceedings may thwart governance is actually not justifiable.
Public Affairs Analyst Godspower Egbule, thank you for talking to us. It's still ahead on TVC News at 7. We have more updates on the developments in Rivers State.